We will now be pleased to hear an oration from the Grand Order of Free and Accepted Masons of Washington, Reverend Brother John Kelleher.
Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Washington, Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Prince Hall Masons of Washington and of Oregon, we have gathered here in the presence of an infinite number of our brethren in the quiet asylum reserved for those whose labors have ended, to whom the issues so important to us have become irrelevant. We are brought here by an instinct which bridges the chasm of death. We have come not so much to consecrate this stone, or the plaque which explains its importance to us, or even the men whose intertwined lives form the historical basis for our existence, as we come to reverence honor. We stay to honor valor, and we shall depart from here to carry with us into that unquiet world beyond the resolve to make our actions a living monument in the age-old struggle for brotherhood. William P. Upton's legacy has brought us here. He entered Masonry with a flourish as he entered upon the practice of law. He settled here in Walla Walla and was quickly elevated to the Superior Court and progressed through the chairs of the Symbolic Lodge. And in a very short space of time, he became the youngest correspondent of the Lodge of the 12 Crowned Martyrs, the Research Lodge of the Grand Lodge of England. But that achievement was at the expense of past Grand Master Drummond of Maine. Drummond had been the principal source of American research until Upton came upon the scene. Upton brought to the law and life and Masonry an impetuousness, that enthusiasm which ensured both his meteoric rise in Masonry and the jealousy of men like Drummond who resented his youth, his relative inexperience, and his preferment. He was adept in the ritual, conversant in the lore of Masonry, and he had that strange, unnamed quality which marked him as a leader. But if he had only been a remarkable ritualist or just an esteemed scholar, none of us would be here today. Upton was an Irish romantic who loved Masonry's innermost meanings with such a passion that it enabled him to transform our art and create such an excruciatingly clear reality that we could not ignore him. We could never forget him, and some could never forgive him. And ultimately, we had to agree with him. We had to see the face of God in his handiwork, our fellow man. You all know the story. In 1897, the Grand Lodge of Washington received a letter from Brothers Gideon S. Bailey and Con S. Rideout, who respectively requested that a way be found that they might visit a subordinate lodge of this grand jurisdiction. A similar letter had been received in 1872, but it had been denied and refused on the grounds that our Grand Lodge recognized but one Grand Lodge in Pennsylvania, and it was not that of the applicants. So the letter from Bailey and Rideout was read to the annual Grand Communication, and it was treated to a deafening silence. One past Grand Master was reported as saying, "Throw it in the wastepaper basket." Then the Grand Orator, John Arthur, moved that Mr. Bailey and Mr. Rideout be informed that the letter was returned to them because it contained nothing to which the Grand Lodge could respond, because they were from an unrecognized jurisdiction. And then the silence ended. Arthur recalled years later that speaker after speaker rose to champion those who had sought the privilege of visitation. And finally a committee was appointed consisting of William P. Upton as chairman, Most Worshipful Brother Past Grand Master Thomas Reed, and Most Worshipful Past Grand Master James E. Edmondson as members. Reed was the Grand Secretary and hailed from Kentucky. Edmondson was a former Civil War veteran of the Confederate Army from Alabama. Upton had been born in California, reared in Oregon, and John Arthur observed that Upton had never evinced any interest in social activism to that time. A committee so composed and ordered to report to Grand Lodge in 1898 must surely have been expected to have returned empty-handed. Upton was a scholar. He dug into the lore of colonial history and Prince Hall Masonry, and the report of 1898 bore his unmistakable stamp. But had it not been convincing, neither Reed nor Edmondson would have concurred, and they did. And the Grand Lodge embraced their committee report, implicitly recognizing the validity of Prince Hall Masonry. And John Arthur watched his own ambition to be Grand Master dissolve in the euphoria with which it was adopted. Upton was elected as Grand Master, and the Grand Lodge of Washington recognized Prince Hall Masonry. In that happy June, some 97 years ago, the Grand Lodge of Washington basked in the warm sunlight which surrounds those who know that they have done the right thing. But their joy was short-lived. It was the era of Plessy versus Ferguson, the doctrine enunciated by the U.S. Supreme Court which confirmed in law the concept of separate but equal. And that doctrine was about to be applied to the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God. And some, like past Grand Master Drummond, saw in this drama an opportunity to reassert their former power, dominate events, and let Upton know that he was not invincible. And as the summer moved toward fall, grand jurisdictions throughout the land began to cut the ties of fraternal recognition with Washington, and Upton spent his year defending what everyone valued in the abstract, and few practiced in the concrete. In the end, all that he fought for was overturned, and still he persevered. At his death, he forbade the Grand Lodge to honor him with any ceremony or stone until we could meet here today as men, as women, children of a common God, Masons all. And so this apparent failure, William Upton, entered history and transformed it. His years of failure were in fact the assurance of his success and ours. Had Upton been realistic, we would not be here today. The reasonable thing for Upton to have done once the other grand jurisdictions began to sever relations with ours would have been to offer the offended our apology, reverse the stated policy, and join in the general retreat. That would have included the ultimate capitulation, his eventual Masonic memorial. But Upton was Irish rather than realistic, and he knew that the power of the law is not in its ability to punish others, but to endure. The law, when it works, does not bludgeon others into compliance, but persuades us that a course of action is proper, because it is morally repugnant to do anything else. The majesty of the law lies in its capacity to present us with a choice and to assure us that it is reprehensible and not a part of our better nature to act in any fashion which derogates from the character of, for want of a better word, a Mason. Upton insisted upon the rightness of his report of 1898 and the rectitude of Grand Lodge's decision to grant the request of two brothers Masons, raised in a lodge of undoubted and undeniable legitimacy, the common descendants of the Grand Lodge of England. Over the lintel of the doorway of the courthouse in which Upton presided was the chiseled statement, "Let justice prevail though the heavens fall." One man in the right, one man claiming justice and proclaiming truth, constitute an absolute majority even on a day when they may be a minority. And among the first to be brought to this Masonic light was John Arthur, the man who had moved that the requests of Brothers Bailey and Rideout be responded to in the negative. Arthur had seen his ambition dissolve. He had witnessed the seal of his exile, but in 1899 he was one of only 3 Masons present to vote to sustain Upton's position in the Grand Lodge. And it was Arthur who served as Upton's executor, and as much as Upton himself, branded upon all our consciences the sense of guilt, cowardice, and debt, which we have at last expiated, but not erased.